We're getting close to the point where we're going to begin to use style sheets to govern the layout of our page, rather than just styling elements on our page. Since we're getting close to that point, now would be a good time to take a moment and introduce the concept of the box model, which we'll use to structure our content on our web pages. What is the box model? Well, let's think about an element that we worked with many times before, such as the paragraph element. That paragraph element represents content that we frequently use on our pages. So let's think about that content as a box. If you're doing a napkin sketch about what you want your page to look like on the train on the way to work, when you figure out what HTML element you want to have structuring your content, as in this example, a paragraph tag, draw a box around it. Now there are three things that we're going to focus on when it comes to manipulating content in this box model concept. We're going to focus on padding, border, and margin. What are those? If we'd like to take this box and expand it outwards so that there was some room between the perimeter of our content and anything else on our page, we would have more space available to us, and the perimeter of that box would move outward. This is what we call padding. So in this example, our border would no longer be right around the perimeter of the paragraph element, rather it would be outwards, at some interval that you define. Also, at that perimeter, spaced out at an increment that you define, you have the ability to define a border, which in this case I exaggerated with a shade of blue here to illustrate the point. So the space between your content area, in this example our paragraph element, and where our border is what's referred to as padding. Now we can also create space on the other side of the border. So if you had content around which you wanted to have a border, you would use padding to create that space, assign a border styled the way that you wish to see that border presented, and then beyond that border, you can define a space in your layout, and that space is known as margin. The box model is a very elegant and efficient way of controlling the content of our page. We discussed in a previous lesson separating layout from content. Using the box model, we can separate layout from content by putting our content into elements, which we then position using cascading style sheets and the box model. We'll get into detail as to how to do this in Chapter 8, but I wanted to introduce the concept now because, as with everything, there are exceptions to rules, and we're going to look at, in Chapter 7, some ways to hard code content within our layout, and then in Chapter 8 we'll look at how to separate content from our layout. There are advantages and disadvantages to both methods for laying out your site, and we'll illustrate that as we walk through those chapters.